Welcome to today's episode of the Picture This podcast. My guest today is an award-winning elementary school librarian, a friend of mine for 12 years now, recognized as a library journal mover and shaker, and a White House champion of change. He is an acclaimed children's literature advocate and the host of the amazing Children's Book Podcast, where he connects listeners of all ages with the authors and illustrators behind today's most powerful stories. I would like to welcome my very good friend, Matthew Winner.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am so excited to have you on here. And as we were talking about just before we started recording, I think the idea of this podcast really feeds into some of the things that you've always done, both as an educator and as a proponent of books. I was talking to my wife on the way to breakfast this morning about that we were going to be recording today, and she's like, I follow him. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. She's like, yeah, I always follow people that talk about your books and then have interesting things to say, which is really kind of the big thing that we're trying to do with this podcast. Is we're trying to find ways to connect people with books in ways other than, okay, you're just going to read this book. How do we provide resources or ideas or sparks to get people thinking that are beyond just, here's a book, learn to read?
Great. I mean, I could say off the bat, I'm a school librarian. I'm an elementary school librarian. I've been in education for about 2 decades. And there are many, many reasons to read books to children, of course. Maybe first and foremost, so they can have the language acquisition. They can hear how we craft sentences. They can hear the poetry in language. They can understand, make inferences, make connections, see themselves, all of those things. So there are absolutely times when what we do in the library is we read a good book so we can bond and we can have a connection. We also, of course, use books as springboards into conversation, or some cases as inspiration for the activities that we do. So I'm happy to talk to you about all of it. I know I'm certainly not unique in using picture books in the library or in the classroom, but I also know that so many of us have so many different ways that we engage in the exact same book. So hopefully whatever I share will spark some sort of thoughts or creativity in however another one of your listeners will use the next book that they pick up.
As an educator, most of your time when you're not actively with students, you're trying to create the curriculum that you're going to use with your students, right?
For the most part, I teach outside of Baltimore in Howard County, Maryland. We have a curriculum that is developed by school librarians. I participate in curriculum writing as often as I can. It's also aligned with our national standards, with AASL, which is the American Association of School Librarians, frameworks for learners. And that is both an information literacy framework as well as a literature appreciation framework. It really is trying to help develop those skills in children that become lifelong skills. How do we craft a question and then find an accurate answer to that question? And how does that then feed into our view of the world and our understanding of everything in it?
My mind is blown by how much you have to do to prepare. And because I sit here and I come up with ideas. What I do, to me, seems very, very simple and straightforward. It's like I just spend my days thinking up, funny things that people might want to read. Conversely, when I am bringing my presentation to schools, I really do think about some of these different kinds of things. Like I want to create something that people can bring back to their classroom. So I have a presentation about character, a presentation I do for This Is a Good Story, where I just talk about protagonists, antagonists, setting, and then we talk about the climax of the book and the turning point. It's pretty simple, and I can, present that to first graders in a way that they'll understand. And I can present it to college kids in a way that they'll understand. What are some of the examples of the way that you've seen authors or illustrators or speakers who come into your schools and things that they've done that have been like a little bit unique and different where you were like, oh, I can bring that back to the library and use that?
I think so often when we have authors or illustrators visit our school or everyone's schools, but in my particular case, we are looking for a tie-in to the curriculum, a relevance, not just the opportunity, which comes, I think, pretty naturally for a child to see themselves in you. Oh, this is a path that I could do. I write stories, and here's what it looks like to craft that story, to edit the story, to take time with the story, all many hands that touch that story, the editors and the directors that touch the hand to get it back into our hands. But our students do develop writing skills. And so to have a second voice sharing, well, here's what it looks like to develop interesting sentences, to develop sentences that or paragraphs that aren't all the same one after the other, that are compelling, that make us want to turn the page. By that same token, when we write, we have to be thinking about our audience, whether or not you're an author or you're a kid. And so I think that's a really transferable skill when we have an author visit. Is not just how to write a story and where ideas come from and how to explore that idea a little bit more and not write it off as, I don't know if people are going to like that idea or not, or I don't know if there's a there, but to think about the audience. I know that many authors write for themselves, for their childhood self, for a specific child in mind. And in that way, the universal is in the specific. And sometimes you end up writing a thing that appeals in such a great way to a great audience. But I also know and mention often that, Mo Willems was on NPR a couple of years ago, and he said famously in his interview, when I write a book, it's 49% mine, but as I'm writing it, it's almost 100% mine. But as soon as that book is published and is out in the world, that 49% stays mine, but the 51% goes to the reader. And what they see in the story and how they use it, that's all them. And that's why we have that magic of, regardless author, what you're writing this book for, sometimes I will read it or a kid will read it and it'll feel like, oh, this is actually a really terrific way to approach this type of conversation that I'm trying to have about empathy, about comparison, about, I don't know what. I think if we might be in danger writing a book trying to get the reader to feel that way, rather trying to leave base enough and speak truth enough that we all can find that connection. And then more importantly, that we can respond to it. The reason why I use these books in my program, and the reason why often I don't just use it 1 year, but if I really like it, I'll use it year over year, is because there's space in there that we can respond through our own writing or creating that allows us to feel like we're working to a degree in tandem with you, the storyteller. So when that author is visiting, much like when I'm teaching, we don't want a sage on the stage, as that line goes in teaching, but we want someone who's there collaboratively and wants to affirm what these kids bring to the table as well.
I really do write for myself. I think I'm a difficult audience. I know what I want to read. I know what I don't want to read. And I think at some point it does switch. I was talking to Sudipta Barton, and we were talking about this. Picture books are kind of a tag team thing. Like there's somebody who's reading it and somebody who's listening to it. So they're collaborative. You have typically an illustrator and an author collaborating on the book, not to mention the editors and all the other people, but they're very collaborative how you put those things together. Like what are some of the things you find yourself wanting to pull out that have that kind of space for you?
I should acknowledge too, as a librarian, Adam, that if I choose the right book to incorporate into my lessons, then that book may never hit the library shelves again. It might get checked out and checked out and checked out. Some of what I do is actually trying to highlight books or series that I feel like these are really good, and I don't see that they're aware of them. And so one of those I made a whole unit out of, a multi-lesson unit out of, was the Narwhal and Jelly graphic novel series by Ben Clanton. And the reason why I chose that in particular to work with my first graders was that first graders are still developing writing skills. So it's hard to sit and write with first graders because it can be, to a certain child, frustrating that they have the idea in their head, but will slow down in trying to write the words that they're trying to write. And as much as I can, especially in the library, because I see them once a week on a fixed schedule, I don't want those barriers to slow us down from creating together. So a really beautiful thing about working with Narwhal and Jelly is, one, I can read an entire book in the series to the students, and the panels are big enough that if I'm reading it aloud, typically there's about 3 or 4 panels on a page. So if we sit close enough, we can still read the graphic novel aloud, but there's really limited language. And often the language is just dialogue, which is really fun too, for kids to be able to just communicate through conversing between characters. So the way I have done this now 2 years in a row was in 4 different classes. For one class, we'll read the first Narwhal and Jelly book, and we will make a comic together. Let's do a 4-panel comic together. I'll give you the starting panel and the final panel. You tell me what happens in between. So in that way, we're making together, and we're all starting with the exact same starting point. And if you don't know how to draw, it's okay. Let's practice drawing Narwhal. Ben Clanton has, many artists now are doing this. They share here's how to draw this character, a couple steps in the back of the book. Dogman does it, and Narwhal does it, and Cloud Puppy does it, and there's many that do it, which is great because kids want to iterate on your stories when they love the characters. So we will all practice drawing Narwhal, and we will all practice drawing things into narwhals, because at one point in book 2, Narwhal wants to make friends, and the way Narwhal builds a pod of friends is by putting narwhal tusks on all of the friends. So we'll draw yourself and put a narwhal tusk, and draw your desk, or some kids will draw like toilet paper. We'll draw this, we'll draw that. They just are silly, but we're playing in that world and playing with the rules that Ben has established for that book series. And then from there, we just start moving a little bit further and a little bit further out. We're going to do the same activity next week, only next week, you're going to do the 4 panels. And then we close with, we're doing an 8-panel comic, fold a paper in half like a hot dog, and then in half like a hot dog, and then in half like a hot dog again. And when you open it, as 8 panels. And what I'm working on with you, the skill I'm developing with you is telling a sequential story. In the library, as often as I can, I want to connect with what you're doing in the classroom. The more I can help those students practice the skills that their teachers are developing, the better. And also, I have some flexibility in my curriculum that my objectives can be met in a lot of different ways. So in that way, I can pull a lot of different books and have it science related or social studies related or story related, and I can connect with a lot of things. So when we do our final 8-page comic, the students then are also riffing. They're basically making fan fiction, either continuations of a Narwhal story, or you know how to draw different characters. So sorry, I'm like hopping around, but I'm pulling a lot of different library objectives into one. We talk about copyright in first grade and in kindergarten. We talk about who has the right to reproduce things and what does that look like, and when we're in school, as well as when you're making something, when you're making satire of something, you can use the likeness of those characters. We're also not trying to sell it. We're also not trying to reproduce it. We're doing in school, so that's also okay. But it's context working with these kids, so they know it's not just I'm telling you draw whatever you want. In the library, we actually have to make sure we're aware of the different contexts with which we're operating. But kids make comics, and some of my favorite ones, Adam, were like Narwhal marries their teacher. So cute. Their teacher's a mermaid. Narwhal's going to marry their teacher. They both have tusks. It's wonderful. It's innocent. It's simple, but it delights that student, and they share it, and it can delight their classmates. And in that way, we are learning how what we make is in communication with our audience. So that's one of the units that speaks right away to what you're asking me is we're hitting on a lot of different things. I'm able to take my time and do it over 4 weeks. And it doesn't matter if you're able to write or not. You can do this wordlessly. You can do this with a couple of prompts on the board. Mr. Winter, how do I spell this word? Let me type it for you. How do you spell that word? I'll make a big word wall for you. You can do it by just letting your creativity run. And in that way, I'm creating an environment where you can't fail. And you're also in community with all of us. And I think that combination of things is something that matters a lot to me in the library.
I love the exercise because that same exercise goes for Dogman. It goes for Cat Ninja. It goes like whatever you're doing, even a standard picture book. Yeah. We can still do an 8-panel kind of thing. So I love that.
Oh, we do that too. These first graders, because you spend time writing, love that. And so the next thing we do is an author study unit with Raoul III in his Vamos books. And so we don't go note for note. We had these comics, let's make more comics. but we play in that world. The Vamos books are very much Richard Scarry inspired. And so it's neat to have a cast of characters and talk about lucha libres and talk about food trucks and talk about all these different things, because in his series, he's continued to build a world of recurring characters. And so being able to reiterate to children that it doesn't need to be a one and done. We can make a thing and play with it and collaborate and have other characters come in. I think anytime that I can build any sort of lesson or unit that not only we can talk about and we can have all these books get checked out all the time, but they can be something that I can refer back to with you in following years. My second graders had done both of those units. And when they saw those books on display, because I was doing them with first grade, they all checked them out. It's okay that you're checking these out. Just so you know, my first graders are going to want to read these. So just when you're done, please return them. But that type of, I don't know, legacy work or something is a really neat thing, because it also allows children to fall in love with the work of an author and to know an author by name, whether it's an author that I've introduced you to or somebody else, to be able to know a body of work and to know an author by name and to be able to say, Mr. Winard, is there a new Narwhal book? I'll order it for you. To be able to have that connection with me, that what you want in this library is something that is part of my job, to make sure that my library collection reflects your needs and interests as well as the classroom teacher's needs and interests. It really, everything feeds together, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it does. And it's something that as authors and illustrators, it's important to us that educators find connection to books, whether it's my book or somebody else's book. I've always connected really well with Chloe and the Lion. I love the interplay of the two characters, author and illustrator. I think is a really cool, it's not quite a parallel, but it's kind of a parallel between the relationship between working with someone, whether you're friends working together on a project or coworkers working together on something or family members doing something together. I think there's always those moments where you just want the lion to eat the other person and be done with it and be like, all right, here we go. And I see a lot of things in what you're talking about that I saw in that particular story, and what you can do with that book or some of the other books that are like it, that talk about how books are made or the people that are part of the books.
We should acknowledge Chloe and the Lion is written by Mac Barnett, illustrated by Adam Rex. And Mac Barnett is our current national ambassador for children's literature.
Yeah. And Mac Barnett, actually, fun fact, when I started to prepare my first ever school visits, Mac was in the area and we had a wonderful little independent children's bookstore over in Doylestown. And the woman that owned the store asked Mac if she could bring me. And Mac, I hung out with Mac for a whole day. Like, this is like fledgling Adam. Warning had like 6 months before it came out. And I was hanging out with Mac freaking Barnett, who spent the whole day with me. We went to lunch together. I went to 3 school visits with him, just as a tag along, and got to see how he interacted with students and how he represented his books and how he tried to connect things. And I mean, that was a priceless experience for me, to be able to do that and see how somebody who was kind of at the peak, and he's still there, but you know, he was at the peak 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and it was just a priceless experience. And of course, Adam Rex, there's a consortium of Adams in children's literature. We all know each other. I don't know, a secret text chain or something like that.
You know, Adam, Mac comes from working with children. He comes from summer camps and things like that. I say that to say for any authors or illustrators that are listening, that goes a long way, working with children, volunteering, reading a book at the school, but also it doesn't need to be that deliberate. Just like volunteering in your kid's classroom or finding an opportunity that you can be around children. It isn't necessary to be a great children's book author, but sometimes we find that the reason why there's space in those books is because you're used to that audience and playing with them. I mean, the reason why Mac Barnett is so good at what he does is because his time on Sesame Street and who he is, just playing alongside children, I think he just naturally leaves that space for children. And so that is also a skill that has to happen. I feel sensitive to the thought here of how do you get your book being used in a classroom? The sensitivity I feel is just that, like, that's not for you to decide. That's for me. to decide, and each teacher to decide. It's important for us to discover these books and to get to read them and get to know them and have our awareness about them. But there's just so many books that come out all the time. That's not always possible. And that's something to acknowledge. But also, uh, the books that speak to me as an educator and how I think about my students, it's just going to be different than the next librarian and the next. And so allowing yourself maybe the grace to know that you made a book, and that's a huge thing. And that can be enough. It would be great for that book to be used in a classroom. And it's great for you to offer ways that it could be used in the class. Great for you to help ideate with me. What could I do? But also, it's working with children. Sometimes there's just kind of a magic of, I pulled this book off the shelf and it was the right one that day. And so it became the right one for the next couple of years.
I've had a gap in my writing.
Okay.
I'll probably cut this part out. I've had a gap in my writing where it was difficult for me to connect in a way that I thought would be meaningful for children. Like that thing that you were just talking about, I was missing. Started right around COVID, was not helped by COVID. And that disconnect where I wasn't going into schools. Like, as authors, we sit in our writing caves. Whether your writing cave is a library or a coffee shop or your desk at work because you write, part-time when you have a break. It's a solo practice.
Yeah.
We do it by ourselves. And school visits are a way to connect, not just to our audience, which is the students, the educators, parents even, but it's a way for us to connect to other people in a meaningful way about something we're passionate about. Whether it's our book or other books is completely irrelevant. We're passionate about literacy. We're passionate about books and what books can do for you. And that was lacking. And it kind of drove me into this hole where it became very, very difficult for me to get the energy to do anything because I didn't have that connection, which I've come to learn is very, very key to me being any good at what I do. Understanding that audience or the energy. Oh my God, the energy you get from a group of kids at a presentation is overwhelming. And I know you get it kind of on a daily basis. You get, your groups of 25 or 30 or however many kids come into your class each time. Library is an exciting class of the day, right? It's a little bit different than your regular classroom. It's kind of fun. There's things that you can do there that are not, math and, and memorizing how to spell words necessarily. It breaks up the day or the week. And it does that for us too, as authors and illustrators. So I'm jealous. I'm a little jealous, I guess is what I'm saying.
It's a special thing to choose to work with children all the time. And it is a life-giving thing. And it's also really, really hard because children grow up, because children listen to everything you say. It's important that I choose just the right book. And how many weeks do I teach you in a given year? I teach you 180 days. And so if I see you one time a week for that many weeks, 35 or 40 weeks, then that means maybe I have a chance to read to you 40 times, but almost definitely not, because I have some classes that are an hour and others that are only 30 minutes. And so if I'm going to do book selection with you, you just start to hear how precious the time is. And also when kids go to related arts, depending on what school you're in, we have county you're in, you have PE, you have art, you have music, you have library, you might have technology. And for different kids, those classes represent different things. Some kids do not like specials. They like being in the classroom because of the community that classroom teacher has built. And you're with them 7 hours a day. Others love to come read because reading is their thing. But I have plenty of kids that reading is not their thing. So when I'm trying to make lessons and make space for them, I try to really be sensitive to what does it mean if you don't see yourself a reader, if you don't see yourself thriving in this space. I think you belong here. So what does that mean to make sure that you all feel like you belong? I say that just to say, like, all of this comes first before I pick whatever book I'm going to use in the classroom. At the same time, though, wow, when I find a book that I love, it's not unlike when I get to share something cool with my kids. I have 2 kids, and to be able to be like, I found this new recipe. It's so good. Let's do it. Or I found this park we should go to. I did the whatever. It's like that. It's an excitement of that. I really like this story. I wonder what they're going to think of it. And honestly, if I read it to all 3 of my second grade classes and they don't like it, I don't use it again. Because it can't be about me. It also has to be how they're responding to the thing that I'm sharing with them.
This is a great opportunity to jump into my next segment, which is Adam's book bag. And this is where we ask you to recommend a picture book that you would suggest for lessons for that reluctant reader that you just described. What is a book that you find reluctant readers can connect with a little bit easier?
Sometimes with especially the bigger kids, I'll just read a chapter from a novel and just hook them that way and be like, I'm gonna to do a lesson with poem excerpts from Rajani Laraka's Red, White, and Whole, or to read. Often they love nonfiction. Oh, those older kids love nonfiction. I read to my 3rd graders recently, Clack, Clack, Smack, which is a stickball story by Tracy Serell, illustrated by Joseph Erb. And what's so cool about this book, which also incorporates Cherokee language, is that the book is like watching a game of stickball. It's not like, let me teach you how stickball is played. It's like you're just watching the game be played. And it's about working on a team, and it's about knowing when not to center yourself, but to give someone else the chance. And also to know that you have value in supporting your teammates. It's just a beautiful book. And when I recently taught that, it's a newer book. This is the first year I've taught it. But in the back of the book, there's a glossary of the Cherokee words, the pronunciation of them. Here's what they look like in the original language, the symbols, and here's how to pronounce them and what they mean in English. But the words occur in the book without a break for, oh, by the way, this word, here's what it means. Here's how to say it. So I photocopied that glossary and handed it to the children, and also stuck a copy to the back of the book so that when I was holding it up, sharing it with them, I could see it, because it's important to me, as read alouds are theater. It's important to me that I don't break the tension that we have in the story because I'm flipping back trying to pronounce something, or because I pronounce something incorrectly. I'm happy to acknowledge to students, I'm going to do the best I can. These are words I'm unfamiliar with, but I have practiced them ahead of time. I think, again, good readers reading aloud to children practice the books that they're going to read, are familiar with the books they're going to read. But by giving the students the copy of that glossary page, it allowed them to follow, to track. The words in the glossary are not alphabetical. They're in order of appearance in the story, which really works out. Great thought in the editor designing that book, or the designer of the book. So as those words appear, there they are in the book. And I tried my best actually to translate mid-story. I don't remember some of the words, but I would read the phrase that included the word. And as I said the word, I would immediately translate it for my students. So that's not the way the book was written, but for accessibility and comprehension for my students, it was an accommodation I made to help keep us focused. And all of this too, one of the reasons I think it was so engaging to children was because they didn't know what stickball was. We could start off talking about what are sports that you play or activities that you play outside. We could talk about what equipment you use. But all of this is in the context of, typically students, I like to pick books that some of you at least have a personal connection with the story. And in this case, in my classes, in this group of 3rd graders, we don't have a personal connection. But how exciting then for how we have to pay attention to this story as we read, because we're watching a game, and as we watch, we're learning the rules of the game by watching, by witnessing. What a beautiful way to acknowledge culture and to acknowledge seeing something different, that beautiful window of a book, by paying attention, by watching, and by noticing kids that look like us or maybe don't look like us, but they're participating in a game together, and we play games together. These games just look different. So that type of thing, Adam, that type of quality where I can offer my students a chance to see a thing, hear a thing, experience a thing that's a little new for them, that makes them, that maybe requires them, beckons them to lean in a little bit and pay attention. Those especially work the best, I find, with my third and fourth and fifth graders who want to understand the world in a more complex way. They have an understanding of the people of the world and the religions of the world, generally speaking, and of the families of the world. They have a general knowledge of that. But now they want to understand the world as it reflects their own experiences, as it's the same or different. So every opportunity I can find a book that really has a clear viewpoint on this is going to be just like you, or this is going to be very different from you, but it's going to help you see the world and its people better. Those are the ones I gravitate toward.
And because kids are really smart, they can connect. So like even if they've never played stickball, they'll connect that to the sport or the activity that they do play, whether it's dance or, or whatever it is.
Wearing jerseys, they're throwing a ball, but they're using two hands and stick, and they are not wearing shoes. They're not wearing pads. But when I play this game, I don't play pads. But when I play this game, I do. And there's great back matter in the book as well. But in this case, this was with a third grade class. So I only have a very, very short time to teach them. So that means for this lesson, I'm probably only going to get to read them a book and have a very short discussion. And in fact, our discussion was an exit ticket, just a little informal assessment where they communicated to me, what did you learn today? Tell me something new you heard or learned, because I, as your teacher, just want to know what stuck with you. For a lot of those kids, what stuck with them was, never heard of this game called stickball before, or I never heard of this language before. Great. That new wrinkle on your brain is everything. That's all I need.
So I do have a section. It's called Story Sparks. I think we've already talked about a bunch of creative prompts for teachers. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace it with something that I think is right up your alley.
Sure.
And that's my librarian's corner. And I know that you are a major advocate for diverse and impactful picture books. So what are some of your tips for curating a diverse collection, or even for authors and illustrators for picking topics that might be more diverse and impactful?
As a librarian, we are required, in my county, we are required to select books that are professionally reviewed. This is the importance of having journals like School Library Journal or Book List. It is a tool that protects us should a book get challenged. We can say, this book was reviewed for grades 1 to 4, therefore it's appropriate for the library. You might have an issue with what's inside it, that we can discuss, but it's a first level of defense, if you will, for making sure that the book is appropriate for kids. And appropriate is a politicized word, I understand, but there are absolutely authors writing books out there that maybe don't have a handle on, this is the topic you want to share. You're hoping it's for an audience of 7 or 8-year-olds. So what does discussing that topic look like for that age? Not at all that kids can't handle it, but they've experienced less life than kids that are older. Not that a kid that's older is going to experience it better or not, but they're just in a different developmental stage. So it can't be you write any book for any audience you're picturing. That language and the approach to the content, everything really has to be thoughtfully made. I think about, there's a new book out by Rob Sanders called Book Comes Home. It's a banned books journey. And there are some really, really terrific, I mean, you're seeing this wall behind me. I have like tons of books that I'm reviewing. And there are really wonderful books coming out about banned books. There's even one, what's the book about Jacob that I love? Jacob's New Dress is one of the books. I wonder if I have the sequel here handy. Oh yeah, I do. Jacob's Missing book. This is Sarah and Ian Hoffman who wrote Jacob's Room to Choose, Jacob's School Play, Jacob's New Dress, a beautiful LGBTQ centering book, gender diversity book, and gender fluidity book. Jacob's Missing book really speaks to the political aspect of books getting removed or challenged. It offended me, therefore no one should read it. That's sort of like, wow, we can really dig into that at grade probably 2 and above. We can really have a nuanced conversation. Rob Sanders comes out with this book called Book Comes Home, illustrated by Micah Player. And it's very, very clear that Rob has his focus on much younger kids, kindergarten, first grade, because it's more about when a book just disappears. And why would it disappear if people were loving that book? And there's a really great, in all the books that were hold is a really great way of describing them as this one was too old, or someone said this one was too funny, or someone said this one is too challenging to read. And it just speaks developmentally to that age of children who their experience of life and all things in it looks much more like, is it fair or not? Versus in second and third grade, we really get a sense of agency. I have a right to choose. I am a different person than my classmate. It just looks different. So a lot of times, Adam, as I'm choosing what right books are used in lessons, it really is, what has a really sturdy understanding of audience. I'm picking books reviewed. If the reviewer notes something along the lines of that, it's a starred review because this writer really had a good sense of audience, or the pictures are really doing something. It's Chooch helped. The Caldecott winning book this year, Andrea L. Rogers and Rebecca Lee Kuntz was the illustrator, where the art is really sophisticated and very clearly telling a story that works in tandem with the words. You couldn't separate them. It would diminish the book. Those types of qualities that feel like they're exceptionally executed are the ones I'm looking for. I also look at, there's a wonderful summer reading list, but you can use the book list anytime, by a group, an organization, a group of people called We Are Kidlit Collective. Tracy Serell has contributed to their work before. Debbie Reese has, a number of people that work in that representation space to make summer reading book lists that are representative of all of our readers in this nation. And because I am in the position that I am, having done the children's book podcast for 12 years and being on the list of a number of publishers, I've come to know the voice of a lot of publishers, and in particular, Kokila and Heartdrum do really wonderful work, but small presses like Imagination Press, which is from the APA, the psychology organization, Lee and Low, which is another small publishing house that is focused on multicultural children's literature. You start to know to watch for books that come out from those publishers. Not every one of us at all can get to library conferences. That's cost prohibitive for me and many, many other people. But being able to get on email lists of, here's what Lee and Low is publishing this fall, or here's what Imagination Press is doing, just anything to help me become aware of titles, because they won't be at the bookstore when I go and walk in. There's hundreds of books that come out, and those bookstores have to curate what they think will sell to their audience, and even they are just taking their best guess. And I have a limited budget, so I can't buy everything either. So a lot of it really comes down to understanding where the gaps are in my collection, what am I missing, and understanding what publisher voices and what author and illustrator voices I've really come to trust, so that they can be first purchases when I'm considering what to add to the collection.
Wow,
it's a lot. You were saying about going beyond teaching. The librarian's role is really fourfold. Just one of those is teaching. I also am the administrator of a library, and I curate a collection, and I also support technology and information literacy throughout the building. It's a lot to do. It's much, much more than just the kids show up to me and I teach them and then they go and I do report card grades. Much, much more than that.
Well, hopefully this podcast and my blog become a good resource for everybody who's doing all of that work, because really anything I can do to help is great. I want to thank you for your time today. Where can people find you so that they can find the podcast and your posts on the socials?
Well, the podcasts are everywhere, wherever podcasts are found. Just look up the Children's Book Podcast. My website is my name, MatthewCWinner.com. And you'll find links to, I make a blog post for every episode that includes a transcript and includes information about the book. I find that really helpful. And I know that some people, for accessibility, it really helps them to follow along that way. So there's the podcast for your ears, but if you prefer to follow along in words, it's there for you too. And I'm on social media too. You can find me. I'm highly Googleable. Matthew Winner, not a lot of us.
Thank you again for being on today. For everybody who's listening or watching, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast. Check me out at my blog, and I'll post links and all kinds of resources below based on what Matthew and I have talked about today.